In 2023, over 240,911 calls were made in the United States. Most end with help arriving in time. But on November 16, 2025, Jeanna Hayes dialed 911 and begged a man named Tony not to shoot her, while the dispatcher listened to everything. The gunshots came anyway. Both Jeanna, 54, and her husband William Charlie Hayes, 56, were executed in their own home by their business associate over money, and the entire murder was recorded in real time during that active 911 call. Anthony Louis Reyes, 61, didn't just confess to the crime. He called someone afterward and told them exactly what he'd done before heading to a casino. The evidence? A recorded 911 call that captured Jeanna's final pleas, witness testimony, and Reyes' own admission. This is the Hayes double homicide. How does a business dispute turn into a double execution while a 911 dispatcher listens helplessly? Subscribe to True Crime Lures to find out. William Charlie Hayes wasn't just a contractor, he was a third-generation builder who'd turned his family's legacy into something concrete. At 56, he'd spent decades perfecting his craft with C.W. Hayes Home Improvement, the company his family established in 1982. The business operated out of their Pasadena, Maryland home on Twickenham Road, specializing in deck construction and vinyl siding repairs. Charlie had a reputation. Search his company online and you'd find 5-star reviews praising his attention to detail and fair pricing. He was the kind of contractor who showed up when he said he would and finished jobs on time. In an industry notorious for flaky operators, that made him stand out. Jeanna, 54, worked alongside her husband in the business. She handled the administrative side, invoicing, scheduling, customer communications. Together, they'd built something stable and successful over the years. The couple lived in Long Point, a quiet waterfront community in Pasadena where everyone knew everyone and serious crime simply didn't happen. They shared their home with an adult granddaughter, though she wasn't there on November 16th. What seemed like an ordinary Saturday afternoon would become the day everything ended. Charlie had taken someone under his wing, a local guy named Mason Barres. According to Barres, Charlie was a good guy to our family, him and his wife. The Hayes were the type who helped people, who gave opportunities. That generosity might have cost them everything. The couple had no idea that their trusted business associate had reached a breaking point. No idea that on this particular Saturday, someone they'd worked with was about to walk into their home with murder on his mind. How does trust become a death sentence? Anthony Louis Reyes was 61 years old, living in Nottingham, Maryland, about a 30-minute drive from the Hayes residence. November 16th wasn't just another day for Reyes, it was his birthday. By the end of it, he'd be charged with double murder. Reyes had worked with the Hayes family through their construction company. Court documents and police statements confirm he had both a personal and business relationship with Charlie and Jeanna. He wasn't just an occasional subcontractor, he was integrated into their operation, someone they trusted with their business. But trust was about to be shattered in the worst possible way. According to someone claiming to be Reyes' cousin, the relationship had soured over money. The cousin told media that Reyes had been stealing from the company and that Charlie found out he was stealing. If true, this would explain the argument captured on the 911 recording about money. But was theft really the motive? Or was there something deeper? Reyes wasn't someone without a past. Court records show he had 2 prior convictions from Baltimore County, break-in and burglary charges dating back nearly 4 decades. He'd served more than 2 decades in prison for those crimes and was labeled a repeat offender by prosecutors. That's significant. This wasn't someone who made one mistake in his youth. This was someone with a documented pattern of criminal behavior. But those convictions were old. There's no public record indicating Reyes had been in serious trouble in recent years. He appeared to be working, maintaining relationships, living a relatively normal life. What happened between the man who'd paid his debt to society and the man who would execute 2 people in their own home? The Hayes had apparently given Reyes a chance, a job, income, a relationship. But somewhere along the line, according to the cousin's account, Reyes started stealing from the people who trusted him. When Charlie discovered it, did he confront Reyes? Threaten to call police? Cut him off? Whatever happened in those final interactions, it led Reyes to make a choice on his 61st birthday. He would go to the Hayes home, and he would bring violence with him. Why did a business dispute require murder? The exact timeline of how Reyes became involved with C.W. Hayes' home improvement isn't fully documented in public records. What's clear is that by November 2025, he wasn't just a casual acquaintance, he was embedded in their business operations. Construction businesses often rely on a network of trusted subcontractors and helpers. It's an industry built on relationships, where reputation means everything. The Hayes had built their company over 4 decades on that foundation of trust. They hired people they believed in. They gave opportunities. Reyes was one of those people. But according to the family member who spoke to media, something had gone wrong. Money was missing. Tools, perhaps. Materials. The specifics aren't in the public record, but the allegation is clear. Reyes had been stealing from the company, and Charlie Hayes had figured it out. In the days or weeks leading up to November 16th, there must have been conversations, confrontations. Maybe Charlie gave Reyes a chance to explain. Maybe he threatened legal action. Maybe he simply told Reyes he was done, that the relationship was over. We don't know those details. What we know is what happened on November 16, 2025, a Saturday afternoon in suburban Maryland that should have been ordinary. At approximately 1:55 p.m., Anthony Reyes arrived at the Hayes residence on Twickenham Road. The adult granddaughter who lived there wasn't home. It was just Charlie and Jeanna. Were they expecting Reyes? Had he called ahead, saying he needed to talk? Or did he show up unannounced? Inside the Hayes home, whatever conversation began between Reyes and Charlie quickly escalated, and Jeanna, perhaps sensing danger, perhaps responding to raised voices, did exactly what she should have done. She called 911. That call would capture everything that came next. At 1:55 p.m., the 911 dispatcher answered Jeanna's call. What they heard would be the stuff of nightmares for anyone in emergency services, a woman begging for her life while her husband argued with their killer. According to charging documents, the dispatcher could hear Jeanna pleading with someone she called Tony. Her voice was desperate, terrified. She was begging him not to shoot, not to hurt them. The fear in her voice was palpable, recorded for posterity, evidence that would later be used in court. At the same time, Tony Anthony Reyes was arguing with Charlie about money. The specifics of that argument weren't fully detailed in public documents, but the topic was clear. This was about finances, about business, about what Charlie had discovered and what Reyes had allegedly done. How long did that argument last? Seconds? Minutes? However long it was, it ended with gunshots. The 911 dispatcher heard them. Clear, unmistakable. Gunfire in a residential home in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. Then came more pleas from Jeanna. She was still alive after the first shots, still conscious, still begging. Could she see her husband on the floor? Did she know he was dead or dying? More shots rang out. Then, silence. The dispatcher stayed on the line, but there was nothing more to hear. No more voices. No more pleas. Just the terrible quiet that follows violence. What goes through a dispatcher's mind when they hear someone murdered in real time and can do nothing to stop it? William Charlie Hayes, 56 years old, was shot to death in his own home. The man who'd spent decades building things, who'd built a business and a reputation, was executed. The exact number of shots that hit Charlie isn't specified in public documents, but the result was clear. He died at the scene. Jeanna Hayes, 54, was also shot multiple times. The woman who'd called 911, who'd begged Tony not to shoot, who'd pleaded for their lives, she was killed anyway. Her final act was trying to save herself and her husband by getting help on the line. It wasn't enough. The shots were loud enough that neighbors would later report hearing them. In a quiet waterfront community like Long Point, gunfire stands out. It's not the sound of Saturday afternoon. It's the sound of something terrible happening. After the shooting, Reyes didn't stay at the scene. He left the bodies of 2 people he'd known, 2 people he'd worked with, lying dead in their home, their adult granddaughter's house, the place where they'd built their business and their life. But here's where Reyes made a critical mistake, one that would help police track him down. He called someone. According to charging documents, a witness later told police that Reyes had phoned them after the shooting, and in that call, Reyes confessed. He told this person that he'd shot Charlie and Jeannie. He admitted it, just straight up told someone what he'd done. But he didn't sound remorseful or panicked. Instead, according to the witness, Reyes said he was planning to go to Maryland Live, casino, and hotel. He'd just murdered 2 people, and he was heading to gamble. Was this denial? Dissociation? Or did Reyes simply not care about what he'd just done? The witness who received that call immediately understood the gravity of the situation. They provided police with crucial information. Reyes was driving a black Toyota sedan with Mississippi license plates. That detail would become critical in the manhunt that followed. Meanwhile, at the Hayes residence, emergency responders were being dispatched. The 911 call had given them the address, but the line had gone silent after those final shots. What would they find when they arrived? Eastern District officers from Anne Arundel County Police reached the scene at the 1700 block of Twickenham Road. They entered the home and discovered exactly what the 911 recording had suggested: a double homicide. Both William and Jeanna Hayes were dead from gunshot wounds. The crime scene told its own story: shell casings, blood spatter, the positions of the bodies. Evidence that this wasn't a struggle or a fight, it was an execution. Reyes had come to the house, argued with Charlie, and when the argument didn't go his way, he'd pulled out a weapon and started shooting. Anne Arundel County Police Chief Amal Awad would later tell media, "We are very surprised to get a call like this here. Long Point simply wasn't the kind of place where people got murdered." The neighborhood was described as a quiet, close-knit waterfront community with little to no crime. The chief noted the timing was terribly horrific, especially right before the holiday season. But horrific or not, the crime had happened. 2 people were dead, and the killer was on the run, potentially armed, driving toward a casino. How long would it take police to find him? Anne Arundel County homicide detectives had several advantages in this case: a 911 recording that captured the crime in real time, a witness who received a confession call, and specific information about the suspect's vehicle. What they didn't have was the suspect in custody. Yet, the first task was processing the crime scene. Investigators photographed everything: the bodies, the shell casings, the blood evidence, the layout of the home. They collected physical evidence that would later be used to reconstruct exactly what happened. The firearm used in the shooting wasn't at the scene, meaning Reyes had taken it with him. That made him armed and dangerous. While crime scene technicians worked the house, detectives focused on tracking down Anthony Reyes. They had his name from the 911 recording. Jeanna had called him Tony. They had his vehicle description from the witness: a black Toyota sedan with Mississippi plates. And they had his stated destination: Maryland Live, casino, and hotel. But police had another technological advantage: automated license plate reader systems. These cameras, positioned throughout the region, automatically scan and record license plates of passing vehicles. If Reyes's Toyota passed one of these cameras, the system would flag it. At approximately 6:27 p.m., more than 4 hours after the murders, the ALPR system got a hit. Reyes's vehicle was spotted near Severn and Ridge Roads, several miles from the murder scene. Officers immediately moved to intercept. When police attempted a traffic stop, Reyes made another critical decision: he ran. The black Toyota fled, leading officers on a pursuit through Anne Arundel County. Was Reyes panicking? Did he think he could escape? Or was this just the final act of someone who knew his life was over? The chase didn't last long. Near Quarterfield Road off Interstate 97 Severn, the pursuit ended. Perhaps Reyes crashed. Perhaps he gave up. Perhaps officers successfully boxed him in. Whatever the tactical details, Reyes' vehicle was stopped. But the arrest itself wasn't smooth. According to police reports, Reyes struggled with officers during the arrest at 6:34 p.m. Both Reyes and at least one officer sustained injuries serious enough to require hospital transport. What was Reyes thinking in those moments? Did he realize it was over? With Reyes in custody, even if he was at the hospital under guard, detectives could build their case. And what a case they had. The evidence was overwhelming. First, the 911 recording. Jeanna Hayes had called for help, and the entire incident was captured. Her pleas, her identifying the killer as Tony, the argument about money, the gunshots. It was all there. Recorded, indisputable. Second, the witness testimony. Someone Reyes trusted enough to call had received his confession. That witness told police exactly what Reyes had said, that he'd shot Charlie and Jeannie. The witness could testify to Reyes' state of mind immediately after the murders, to his plan to go to the casino, to his apparent lack of remorse. Third, the vehicle information and pursuit. The witness had provided the description with the distinctive Mississippi plates. The ALPR system had tracked its movements. Officers had pursued and stopped that exact vehicle with Reyes inside. The chain of custody was clear. Fourth, the crime scene evidence. Shell casings, bullet trajectories, blood spatter patterns. All of it would be processed by forensic experts. When the medical examiner performed autopsies on the Hayes, the bullets recovered from their bodies could potentially be matched to a weapon if police found it. But there was a problem. Police reported that the firearm had not been located. Where was the gun Reyes used? Had he ditched it during the drive to Severn? Hidden it before the traffic stop? Thrown it out the window during the chase? Still, even without the murder weapon, the case was strong. Reyes had been identified on a 911 recording. He'd confessed to a witness. He'd fled from police. He'd been arrested hours after the murders in the vehicle matching the witness description. Anne Arundel County detectives presented their findings to the state's attorney's office. The charging decision was straightforward. Anthony Louis Reyes was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, and 2 counts of second-degree assault. In Maryland, first-degree murder requires premeditation, planning, and deliberate intent to kill. Did Reyes plan this before arriving at the Hayes home? Or did the plan form during the argument? Prosecutors would argue that retrieving a weapon and shooting 2 people, even during an argument, showed enough deliberation to constitute first-degree murder. Anne Arundel County homicide detectives continued encouraging anyone with additional information to call 410-222-4731, likely seeking the weapon, more witnesses, or further evidence about the business relationship that allegedly sparked the murders. Anthony Reyes' first court appearance came on Monday, November 18, 2025, 2 days after the murders. He appeared via video link, having been treated for injuries sustained during his arrest. Facing a judge while accused of double murder, how does someone process that reality? The charges were read: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, and 2 counts of second-degree assault. Each murder count in Maryland carries a potential sentence of life in prison. Reyes was looking at the possibility of never being free again. During that initial appearance, Reyes made a strategic decision. He waived his right to a bail review. This meant he wouldn't argue for release pending trial. Whether this was advice from his attorney or Reyes's own choice isn't publicly documented, but the practical effect was clear: he would remain in custody without bond. Reyes did request a preliminary hearing. This is a proceeding where the prosecution must demonstrate probable cause that the defendant committed the crimes charged. It's not a trial, but it does require the state to present evidence showing there's reason to believe Reyes killed the Hayes. The judge granted the request and ordered Reyes held without bond. What could Reyes' defense possibly argue? The 911 recording captured Jeanna calling the killer Tony. A witness received a confession call. Reyes fled from police. He was arrested in the vehicle described by that witness. The evidence pointing to his guilt was substantial. Self-defense? Impossible. The victims were in their own home. Jeanna was calling 911 begging someone not to shoot. There's no scenario where shooting two people in their house while one is on the phone with police constitutes legitimate self-defense. Mistaken identity? The 911 recording captures Jeanna using the name Tony. The confession call identifies the shooter as Reyes. He fled from police. That defense won't work. Mental state? Possibly the only angle. Could Reyes' attorneys argue diminished capacity? That he was in some kind of mental health crisis? That would be difficult given the apparent premeditation, traveling to the Hayes home, bringing a weapon, and then fleeing afterward to go to a casino. The prosecution's case appeared straightforward. Reyes had motive, opportunity, and means. The evidence was documented. The 911 call alone was damning. As the case progressed through pre-trial proceedings, that missing murder weapon remained a question mark. Would Reyes reveal its location as part of a potential plea negotiation? The preliminary hearing would be scheduled for a future date, where prosecutors would present their evidence, and Reyes' defense attorneys would have their first real opportunity to challenge the state's case. What would that hearing reveal? For now, Reyes remains in custody, awaiting further court proceedings. His 61st birthday, November 16, 2025, is now forever marked as the day he allegedly murdered two people. The man who'd served more than 20 years in prison decades ago for burglary and break-ins now faced spending the rest of his life behind bars for something far worse. As of today, Anthony Reyes remains in Anne Arundel County Detention Center awaiting trial. Every day in that cell, does he think about the 911 recording? About Jeanna's voice begging him not to shoot? About the choice he made that can never be undone? The Hayes family must now navigate life without Charlie and Jeanna. Their adult granddaughter, who lived with them, lost both grandparents in a single afternoon. She'd been spared being home during the murders, but that's cold comfort when you return to find your grandparents have been executed. How do you ever feel safe in that house again? Mason Burris, the family friend who'd spoken about Charlie taking him under his wing, must grapple with the loss of his mentor. A good guy to our family. Him and his wife, he'd said. Past tense now. That's what murder does. It forces everyone to speak in past tense about people who should still be present. C. W. Hayes Home Improvement, the business established in 1982, built over 4 decades, is now shuttered. The company that had excellent reviews, that Charlie and Jeanna ran from their home, died with them. What happens to their clients with half-finished projects? To the legacy of 3 generations of builders? The Long Point community must now process having a double homicide in their neighborhood. The house on Twickenham Road where people were murdered isn't just an address anymore. It's a crime scene, a tragedy, a reminder that violence can reach anywhere. If Reyes had children or other family, they must now explain to people that their relative is charged with double murder. They must decide whether to visit him in jail, whether to support him through trial, whether to believe his version of events. What do you say when someone you know kills 2 people? The legal system grinds forward slowly. Reyes' preliminary hearing will eventually happen, followed by potentially a trial. If convicted on first-degree murder charges, he faces life in prison without parole, possibly multiple life sentences. At 61, that's effectively a death sentence by incarceration. Questions remain. Where is the murder weapon? Will Reyes ever reveal what he did with the gun? Could recovering it provide additional evidence or closure? What exactly did Charlie discover about the alleged theft? How much money are we talking about? Was it thousands? Tens of thousands? Does the amount even matter when it led to 2 deaths? Were there signs this confrontation was coming? Had Charlie confronted Reyes before November 16th? Had there been threats, heated conversations, or did this escalate faster than anyone could have predicted? The 911 recording will be played in court. A jury will hear Jeanna Hayes begging for her life. They'll hear the argument. They'll hear the gunshots. How do jurors process that kind of evidence? How do they go home to their families after hearing someone murdered in real time? The case stands as a reminder that business disputes can turn deadly when the wrong people are involved. That someone with a violent criminal history from decades ago might still be capable of extreme violence. That access to firearms makes escalation fatal. that calling 911 isn't always enough to save you. William Charlie Hayes should be working on decks right now. Jeanna should be scheduling jobs and managing invoices. They should be celebrating upcoming holidays with their granddaughter. Instead, they're buried, and their killer sits in a cell awaiting trial. The justice system will process this case. Reyes will have his day in court. Evidence will be presented. A verdict will be reached. But no verdict brings Charlie and Jeanna back. No prison sentence undoes November 16th. No amount of justice restores what was stolen from the people who loved them. What did Anthony Reyes gain? If the allegations are true and he was stealing from the company, how much did he take? Enough to justify murdering 2 people? Of course not. There's no amount of money worth 2 lives. So why do it? Why not just walk away? Why not face the consequences of theft rather than create consequences of murder? These are questions Reyes may never adequately answer, even if he speaks at trial. The hardest truth is this: Charlie and Jeanna Hayes died over a business dispute, over something that could have been resolved with lawyers and accountants and maybe criminal charges for theft. Instead, it was resolved with bullets, while a 911 dispatcher listened helplessly. The case continues. The family grieves, and somewhere in a detention center, Anthony Reyes waits for trial, knowing that a recording exists of the moment he destroyed multiple lives, including his own. Some cases have complicated moral questions. This isn't one of them. The evidence appears clear. The victims were in their own home. One called 911 begging for help. The other tried to reason with his killer. Neither should have died that day. And yet they did. Because someone decided that a business dispute required murder. Because someone with access to a gun chose to use it. Because trust, the foundation of their business relationship, became the weapon that got them killed. The Hayes family built things. Now, all that's left to build is a case against the man who allegedly destroyed them.